The air was thick with unease in the high chamber of the Galactic Federation station. The stark metallic walls reflected the cold, artificial light, amplifying the tension. The Carxian delegation, towering figures clad in ceremonial armor, sat rigidly across from the human representatives. Their amber eyes glinted with suspicion, the sharp angles of their predator-like faces conveying a mixture of disdain and wariness. Despite the palpable hostility, the human delegation remained calm. Their leader, a composed diplomat named David Hensley, speaking with measured tones. "This isn't just a military operation," he said, his voice steady but firm. "It's a promise. We will protect your cubs as if they were our own." A low growl rumbled from one of the Carxians, his claws scraping against the table. "Humans," the warrior snarled, "you are prey. Why should predators trust you to guard what we hold most precious?" The silence was deafening. Every non-human species in the room seemed to lean in, awaiting the human response. Hensley met the Carxian's gaze without flinching. "Because, when it comes to protecting the innocent, humanity has no equal." The room seemed to hold its breath. The Carxians exchanged glances, but said nothing more, leaving the proposal hanging in the charged air. The Carxians were an ancient warrior species, their civilization forged in the fires of a predatory ecosystem. Fiercely territorial and unwavering in their devotion to family, they were known to fight to the death over the slightest threat to their young. For centuries, they'd maintain a reputation as one of the galaxy's most formidable species. Their cubs were seen as the future of their bloodlines, guarded with a ferocity that few could match. Humanity, on the other hand, was a relatively new member of the Galactic Federation. Though physically unimpressive compared to many species, they had quickly earned a reputation for their ingenuity and adaptability. Yet, what truly set them apart was their unwavering moral compass, even in the face of impossible odds. Stories of humans risking their lives to save alien species in peril had become legendary. The current crisis demanded such courage. A rogue faction comprised of exiles and mercenaries from various species had targeted the Carxian homeworld. Their aim: complete annihilation of the Carxian race. The Carxian leadership had no choice but to evacuate their cubs to secure locations, a task requiring coordination and resources they lacked. Reluctantly, they had turned to the Federation for help. To their shock, the humans volunteered without hesitation. "Why?" the Carxian elder had asked, his voice gruff with mistrust. "Why risk your lives for us?" The human diplomat had smiled faintly. "Because protecting life, especially the young, is what we do." The Carxians were greeted by humanity's elite task force, a group of soldiers renowned across the galaxy for their unconventional tactics and strict adherence to a moral code. At their head stood Captain Elena Carter, a woman whose calm demeanor concealed a mind sharp as a blade. She approached the Carxian delegation with measured steps, her olive-green uniform pristine, her piercing eyes scanning every detail of the room. "We understand the gravity of this mission," Carter began, her voice steady. "Your cubs are not just your future, they're your hope. We will treat them as such." One of the Carxian warriors, a towering figure with scars running across his snout, scoffed. "Words. Empty words. You are soft human. Compassion will not save you on the battlefield." Carter didn't flinch. Instead, she gestured to her team, who stood at perfect attention. "We are not soft," she said, her tone unyielding. "We're adaptable. We've fought battles where the odds were stacked against us, where survival seemed impossible. And yet we prevailed, not because of brute strength, but because we value life above all else." The Carxian's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he gave a grudging nod. "We shall see." The Carxian skepticism was almost tangible as they observed the humans during their initial planning sessions. Their distrust wasn't unwarranted. They had seen species fail before, faltering when faced with the ruthless nature of war. One of the younger Carxian advisors leaned toward a human officer. "Why do you care so much about our cubs? They are not yours." The officer, a man named Sergeant Caleb Ortiz, smiled faintly. "Let me tell you a story. Earth was once a dangerous place, filled with predators stronger and faster than us. We weren't the strongest species, but we survived because we protected each other, especially our young. That instinct to safeguard the future is what defines us." The Carxian advisor tilted his head, intrigued despite himself. "And you think this instinct will be enough?" "It's always been enough," Ortiz replied simply. By the end of the meeting, the Carxians remained wary, but the seeds of trust had been planted. For the first time in their history, they would place their cubs in the hands of another species. As the final terms were agreed upon, the Carxian elder spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "We will hold you to your promise, humans. Do not fail us." Captain Carter inclined her head solemnly. "We won't." The mission's first step required understanding the Carxian cubs, a challenge the human soldiers embraced with surprising enthusiasm. Side by side with Carxian advisors, they delved into the nuances of Carxian culture and biology. The cubs, though young, were not helpless. They possessed sharp instincts and rudimentary predatory skills. Yet their needs for security and emotional stability mirrored that of human children. Human soldiers adjusted their approach accordingly, modifying evacuation protocols to create environments that would feel safe for the cubs. Meals, for instance, became a topic of immediate focus. Carxian cubs required a high-protein diet, but were also prone to rejecting unfamiliar smells. The humans worked tirelessly to mimic the cubs' natural diet, going so far as to request detailed recipes from the Carxian elders. Training drills, too, were restructured. Instead of regimented human exercises, soldiers adapted their methods to account for the cubs' quick reflexes and group-oriented instincts, designing games that disguised drills as play. The Carxian advisors, initially dismissive of human efforts, began to watch with growing respect. A young Carxian warrior, observing a human officer's painstaking efforts to recreate a Carxian lullaby, muttered to a comrade, "They care more about this than we expected." His comrade only grunted in reply, too engrossed in watching a group of humans teaching cubs how to navigate an escape pod. Unintentional bonds began to form between the species. Human soldiers found themselves laughing at the cubs' antics, chasing holographic projections of prey animals, growling in mock ferocity when they caught their quarry. During a mealtime break, a cub sneaked a piece of human rations, sniffed it, and made an exaggerated gagging sound, causing a ripple of laughter among the troops. In return, Carxian adults began to see humanity's lighter side, a stark contrast to their own strict, warrior-like demeanor. One evening, a Carxian elder stood watching a group of cubs gather around a human soldier who was teaching them a simple earth melody on a harmonica. The elder's sharp eyes softened as the cubs clumsily imitated the tune. "Your species," he said, his voice contemplative, "does not merely adapt. You weave yourselves into others' lives. It is a rare thing." The soldier gave a modest smile. "Kids are kids, no matter the species." As the days wore on, the humans transitioned from bonding exercises to hard tactical preparations. Evacuation convoys were designed with unprecedented ingenuity. The humans employed cloaked drones to scout ahead, placing decoys in critical locations to mislead potential attackers. At the same time, Carxian warriors were integrated into the convoy to ensure the cubs would always see familiar faces, even in the heat of an emergency. Human engineers worked tirelessly, retrofitting Carxian ships to include human tech enhancements. Turrets were upgraded with precision-guided systems, shields optimized for better coverage. The humans' knack for improvisation became apparent as they cobbled together devices from limited resources, drawing impressed murmurs from their Carxian counterparts. During one demonstration, a Carxian warrior folded his arms skeptically as a human soldier explained their strategy for deflecting incoming fire. By the end of the presentation, the warrior gave a grudging nod. Your methods lack brute strength, but your precision it may prove useful. Useful is what we aim for, the human replied with a grin. The humans also adjusted for the Carxians' warrior tendencies. Rather than sidelining them, they created a joint defense strategy that blended human ingenuity with Carxian ferocity. Carxian warriors, initially dismissive of human reliance on technology, found themselves grudgingly impressed when the humans demonstrated how their drones could herd attackers into close-range ambush zones where Carxian claws and strength would dominate. Despite the camaraderie forming, tension brewed as reports of enemy probes surfaced. Rogue faction ships were detected near the evacuation zone, their erratic movements hinting at an attack. The humans responded immediately, heightening security and running emergency drills. The Carxians, while uneasy, were reassured by the humans' readiness. Captain Elena Carter, addressing her team during a late-night briefing, summed it up succinctly. We're not waiting for them to make the first move. If they think they can catch us off guard, they're in for a surprise. The Carxian elder, listening from the back of the room, felt a flicker of something he hadn't expected. Trust. Humans might not be predators in the traditional sense, but they were certainly not prey. The evacuation began with an air of tense anticipation. Human soldiers moved with practiced precision, guiding Carxian cubs and their caretakers into evacuation vessels. The cubs, initially restless, were calmed by the soldiers' steady presence. A young soldier knelt to reassure a trembling cub, offering a small, holographic toy that projected images of familiar Carxian wildlife. The cub hesitated before swiping at the image, their apprehension melting into curiosity. Around them, Carxian caretakers exchanged cautious glances, noting the human's ability to maintain composure even under the looming threat of attack. The convoy launched in staggered waves, each vessel cloaked by human-engineered countermeasures. Despite the urgency, there was no chaos. Every move was calculated. Soldiers monitored radar and communication lines, their eyes darting between screens and the cubs they had sworn to protect. One soldier cracked a joke about Earth's old space shuttles, earning a surprised chuckle from a Carxian warrior standing nearby. The unexpected moment of levity eased the tension, even if only briefly. The first attack came without warning, shattering the fragile calm. Enemy ships emerged from the void, their weapons blazing as they targeted the convoy. Alarms blared, and the human soldiers sprang into action. Decoy vessels deployed immediately, drawing fire away from the evacuation ships. Cloaked drones, pre-programmed for defensive maneuvers, swarmed the attackers, releasing electromagnetic pulses to disrupt their targeting systems. Captain Elena Carter issued orders with sharp efficiency, her voice cutting through the chaos. Squads Alpha and Bravo form a perimeter. Protect the evac ships at all costs. Carxian warriors joined the defense, their brute strength complementing human strategy. A group of attackers attempted to breach the convoy's rear flank, but a coordinated ambush, human traps combined with Carxian melee prowess, cut them down swiftly. A Carxian warrior, standing shoulder to shoulder with a human soldier, paused to observe the human's unrelenting focus. Your species fights with the precision of hunters, he remarked, his tone edged with reluctant admiration. Precision and teamwork, the soldier replied without looking away from his target. Despite their efforts, the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. A rogue faction ship broke through the defensive line, heading straight for a vulnerable evacuation vessel carrying cubs. A human squad intercepted, launching themselves into the path of danger. The Carxian caretakers aboard the ship watched in stunned silence as the humans engaged the attackers, their movements deliberate despite the inevitable cost. Pinned down and outnumbered, the squad leader activated a last resort device, a small but powerful EMP burst designed to disable enemy ships at close range. The soldier's voice crackled over the comms, addressing both his team and the Carxians aboard the ship. Get those cubs out of here. We'll hold the line. The explosion that followed was brief but blinding, leaving the convoy shaken. When the dust settled, the rogue ship was gone, and so was the squad. A Carxian caretaker, holding a trembling cub, whispered, "They sacrificed themselves for us." In the silence that followed, one of the surviving Carxian warriors clenched his claws, his voice breaking. They didn't hesitate. They didn't even hesitate. Captain Carter's voice came over the comms, steady but laced with grief. "We don't leave anyone behind. Keep moving. We'll make their sacrifice count." The humans regrouped quickly, their losses fueling their determination. Using the temporary lull in the attack, Carter orchestrated a counterstrike. Drones and decoys were deployed in a coordinated maneuver, drawing the remaining attackers into a kill zone. Carxian warriors, now fully aligned with human tactics, unleashed devastating counterattacks on the disoriented enemy. The rogue faction's forces, caught off guard by the humans' adaptability and the Carxians' ferocity, retreated into the void. The convoy pressed onward, battered but intact. Among the Carxian survivors, the humans' actions had spoken louder than any words. Trust, once grudgingly offered, had now been earned in blood. Captain Carter stood before the combined human and Carxian forces, her expression resolute despite the weight of the situation. The rogue faction was regrouping for another attack, and time was running out. She laid out her plan with unflinching clarity. The humans would use holographic decoys and cloaked ships to bait the enemy fleet into a nearby asteroid field, where the natural hazards would give the defenders an advantage. While the rogue ships were occupied, the evacuation vessels would escape undetected. The room buzzed with tension. A Carxian elder frowned, his claws clicking against the table. "Your plan is audacious. If even one decoy fails, the cubs will be exposed." Carter met his gaze without flinching. "I know the risks, but it's our best shot. We've studied their patterns, they'll take the bait, and we'll make sure every decoy holds." The Carxians exchanged uneasy glances, but the resolve in Carter's voice left little room for argument. One of the younger Carxian warriors finally spoke, his voice grudging but firm. "Your courage is unusual for prey species. Perhaps too unusual." "It's not courage," Carter replied. "It's conviction. Those cubs are counting on us, and failure isn't an option." The Carxians, swayed by her determination, gave their reluctant approval. The plan's execution began with calculated precision. Holographic decoys appeared on enemy scanners, simulating a scattered fleet of evacuation ships. The rogue faction took the bait, breaking formation to pursue what they believed were easy targets. Meanwhile, cloaked human vessels coordinated the decoy fleet's movements, ensuring the illusion held. Carxian warriors, now fully integrated into the human command structure, provided backup. Their ships shadowed the decoys, ready to ambush any rogue vessels that deviated from the trap. The once skeptical Carxians found themselves admiring the humans' adaptability and foresight. As the rogue fleet advanced, they entered the asteroid field, a chaotic expanse of tumbling rocks and debris. Here, the humans sprung their trap. Drones, pre-programmed with kamikaze protocols, launched from hidden positions, targeting the enemy's critical systems. Simultaneously, cloaked ships unleashed precise salvos, using the asteroids as both cover and weapons. The rogue faction quickly found themselves outmaneuvered. Ships collided with asteroids, their shields unable to withstand the relentless assault. Carxian warriors, emboldened by the humans' bold tactics, joined the fray with ferocious efficiency, ensuring no attacker escaped. From the command ship, Captain Carter coordinated the battle, her calm voice guiding the combined forces. When the last rogue vessel was destroyed, a cheer erupted among the humans. The Carxians, though quieter in their celebration, exchanged nods of respect with their human counterparts. As the final evacuation proceeded, disaster struck. A sudden shift in the asteroid field caused turbulence, separating a Carxian cub from the group. The cub, panicked and vulnerable, became trapped near the edge of the convoy. The nearest human soldier, Sergeant Maya Phillips, didn't hesitate. Ignoring the protests of her comrades, she sprinted toward the cub, weaving through the unstable terrain. The Carxians watched in stunned silence as Phillips reached the cub, shielding it with her body as debris rained down around them. Using her comms, she relayed her position and requested extraction. But the field was becoming increasingly unstable. "Hold on tight," she whispered to the cub, her voice steady despite the danger. Against all odds, a rescue ship maneuvered through the chaos, guided by Phillips' beacon. She handed the cub to a Carxian caretaker before climbing aboard, her face streaked with soot but determined. The Carxian elder, witnessing the event, stepped forward, his voice breaking with emotion. "You risked your life for one cub. Why?" Phillips smiled faintly, exhaustion evident in her eyes. "Because every life matters. That's what we believe." The elder bowed his head, a gesture of profound respect. For the first time, the Carxians fully understood the depth of humanity's convictions. In that moment, trust was no longer a fragile concept. It was unshakable. The aftermath of the battle was a mix of somber reflection and quiet celebration. Survivors from both species regrouped aboard the remaining evacuation vessels, their exhaustion evident but their relief palpable. Human soldiers moved through the crowded spaces, checking on Carxian cubs and caretakers, offering words of reassurance despite their own grief. The names of the fallen were spoken with reverence. Among the Carxians, mourning was silent, marked by the quiet sharpening of claws or the lowering of heads. The humans honored their own in a similarly solemn manner, their traditions blending in a shared moment of loss. Captain Elena Carter stood among them, her gaze steady as she addressed both the humans and Carxians. "We've lost good people today on both sides, but we've achieved something far greater. We've shown that when we stand together, we can protect what matters most." A Carxian elder stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the human captain. "You have proven something to us humans. You do not fight for dominance or conquest. You fight for others. It is a rare and humbling quality." His voice softened, carrying the weight of respect. "For that, you have our gratitude." In the days following, the Carxians extended a gesture of profound respect. They allowed their cubs to interact freely with the human soldiers. It was a rare and symbolic act, one that had never been offered to another species. The soldiers, many still recovering from their injuries, were taken aback by the trust implicit in the gesture. They quickly found themselves surrounded by curious cubs, who climbed over their armor and inspected their strange human gadgets. One cub tugged on a soldier's sleeve, mimicking a salute it had seen earlier. The soldier laughed, showing the cub how to do it properly. The Carxian caretakers, watching from a distance, marveled at the ease with which the humans engaged with the cubs. A young Carxian warrior commented, "They treat the cubs as if they were their own." "Perhaps that is why they succeed where others fail," an elder replied. "They do not see boundaries between us." In turn, humans found themselves learning from the Carxians. Soldiers listened intently as the warriors explained their combat traditions and survival instincts, fascinated by the cultural nuances. Shared meals became a nightly ritual, with humans introducing Carxians to earth dishes while attempting to stomach the more pungent offerings of their hosts. Laughter, once scarce, began to fill the air. As a mission came to an end, Captain Carter stood in the quiet of the observation deck, watching the stars drift past. The galaxy, vast and often hostile, felt a little less so in that moment. Her thoughts drifted to the events of the past days. Humanity had always been the underdog in the galactic community, not the strongest or the most advanced. Yet, time and again, they had carved a place for themselves through sheer adaptability and an unyielding sense of compassion. She recalled the countless moments of selflessness she had witnessed, soldiers shielding cubs without hesitation, engineers working tirelessly to modify alien technology, and comrades giving their lives for a cause greater than themselves. We're not the fiercest, she murmured to herself, but we are the most stubborn when it comes to protecting what we care about. Unbeknownst to her, a Carxian elder watched from the shadows. Later, aboard the Carxian flagship, the elder began recording his account of the mission for future generations. He spoke of the rogue faction's defeat, but more importantly, he spoke of humanity. They are not predators as we are, nor are they prey. They are something else entirely, guardians of life. They risk all for the young, even those not their own. It is a lesson we will carry forward. The recording ended with a single, solemn statement. Today, we have learned why even predators trust humans with their cubs.